Algae Against CO2 by Sylvia Diaz. Greenhouse gases and CO2 in the environment. Now, humans are responsible for the drastic increase of greenhouse gases over the last 150 years. Now, the biggest contributors of that is the burning of fossil fuels for electricity, heat, and transportation, and these also cause an increase of CO2. Now, CO2 is responsible for 82% increase of heat trapping capacity of the atmosphere, which has been causing temperatures rising, as well as one-third of the world's remaining glaciers will melt before the year 2100. Now, if you look at the graph on the top right, it pretty much shows the different contributors of CO2, as well as the graph on below it shows that there has been a 20% increase of CO2 over the last 40 years and a 40% increase of CO2 since the Industrial Revolution. Now, Earth's natural defense against CO2. Photosynthesis is the process in which plants and other organisms convert sunlight into CO2 through cellular respiration in O2. Now, if I move myself, you could see that carbon dioxide plus water through photosynthesis will give you glucose and oxygen, as well as this little diagram just shows in more in depth the different process. Now, 1 acre of algae can remove up to 2.7 tons per day of CO2, which is 10 to 50 times higher than terrestrial plants. As well as it contributes 45% to 50% of CO2 intake versus trees that only have 13%. Now, it's important to take into account that 40% of world trees have been cleared over the past 12,000 years. Therefore, plants and organisms on their own cannot manage to take on the challenge of managing the increasing percentage of greenhouse gas emission in the atmosphere. Now, my hypothesis. I hypothesize that I'll be able to utilize algae's ability of photosynthesis in the buildings as a mechanism to help restore the environment. Now, the positive effects is of CO2 reduction. It'll halt the effects of global climate change, as I said previously, with the glaciers melting, improve the overall health of humans by decreasing the risk of asthma and respiratory issues, as well as maintain and improve the biodiversity by decreasing the likelihood of extinction. Now, with extinction, there is a different or changes in the food chain, which can create large effects on both not only animals but humans and the whole ecosystem. And if you look at this graph, it just shows that there's been an average increase of temperatures over the last couple years. Now, my concept. So my concept is pretty much, I believe that CO2 is the most concentrated in cities or highly condensed areas. Therefore, I'll create a structure that filters out CO2 with the use of algae, which is similar to lungs, but it breathes in the carbon dioxide and out the oxygen. Now, if you look above at the top two pictures, it's a new concept in Dubai, which was my inspiration for the 3D model that you'll see below, and I'll just move myself a little bit. And that I created. Now, utilizing the building stack effect, you will be able to draw in air, conserving energy that flows through the interior of the building. And this is extremely great because the building will also be multifunctional with recreational space in the inside. Now, my experimentation, this is just pretty much all my materials and my process, and this is pretty much what my setup looked like. Now, data on a table. My constant without LED pretty much showed that algae needs sunlight in order to carry out photosynthesis. This was seen with a 0.1% decrease over 20 hours without LED. However, over 24 hours with a LED, there was a 27.5% decrease. And this was also seen with over 160 hours. There was an 83% decrease, and this correlates with the 75% increase of algae within the water bottle. Now, this is pretty much my data on a graph, and it's my constant, and as you can see, there is a little to no decrease of CO2, and this is pretty much my algae against CO2, which is the title, and it shows that there's a significant decrease with the LED light, which pretty much proves photosynthesis. So my conclusion. In conclusion, algae, like euglena, can decrease CO2 significantly and can be able to be used as humans' primarily defense against CO2 emission. Therefore, I can use algae as an internal mechanism inside a structure to be able to rebalance the greenhouse gases within the atmosphere, as they almost act like trees. Although the results of the building may not be immediate over time, it will be able to reverse multiple effects of global climate change, improving overall health of the public, and preserving the ecosystem. Thank you all for listening, and here are my references and all of the sources that I've used.